We are the fastest growing outdoor lifestyle brand in Ireland at the minute. We actually took the choice to stop using the word sustainable. Any business or brand that's manufacturing and shipping all over the world can actually be sustainable. I don't think people understand what the word means, but making sure we bring the right people in who have the right mindset is very important. I think what is very important and often overlooked is
in this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with Matt Creighton, the founder of Bluebird, an outdoor lifestyle brand with one foot in the French Alps and one foot on the beaches of Northern Ireland. We filmed this episode above Bluebird's Belfast store just before Matt returned to the Alps for the ski season. I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please leave us a review or comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. So Matt, what would you like the audience to get out of our conversation today?
Well, I guess I've got a bit of a story to tell, finding a brand in a pretty competitive market, and probably against a lot of odds. We're making it work. So there's maybe some learnings I've got to share, some experience, a little bit of knowledge too. So hopefully somebody can benefit from that.
Okay, great, perfect. Well, maybe before we get into the business a little bit, let's kind of learn a little bit about you. Mm-hmm. And if I understand well, both your parents were teachers, so which I think, at least for my generation, and I'm probably quite a bit older than you, but unfortunately, I hate to say it, but teachers are like a very classic professional career path. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. quite formal, very respected from a career point of view. And it seems like entrepreneurship compared to teaching is like quite a heavy contrast. So why do you think you've kind of ended up doing what you're doing, based on the fact that you had this more kind of, let's say kind of formal reference when you were growing up?
Yeah, the answer to that, I don't really know, I guess. Mum and dad teachers. Dad's a PE teacher. Mum's a French and German teacher. They're both retired now. They do find the concept of me going out on my own and running a business quite alien, and they would regularly say that. They don't really understand it, and it's hard for them to fully grasp in a way. Where I got the entrepreneurial spirit from, I don't really know. I didn't really sense it when I was a kid. I went to uni to follow in my dad's footsteps, actually, to become a PE teacher, only because I didn't know what else I was going to do. And then I managed to get out to the Alps to go on many ski seasons. And that is where the sort of want and need to make a little bit of money, whether it was all above board or not, I don't really know. But that's where it started. I guess because you get paid so little. Back then, before Brexit, you get paid so little to be a seasonaire. And you had to sort of make a little bit of cash on the side. And then once you get a taste for that, then I think you're hooked. And that is probably where it came from. But certainly didn't come from mum or dad.
So you already said, actually, in your answer to the first question, about the fact that the apparel market is an ultra competitive market. And I would say the sports outdoor lifestyle probably even more competitive, because over the last years, there's been so many new entrants at a time where there are also massive market leading brands. So why apparel? What was there were probably many options to make a little bit of extra cash when you're out in the Alps. So why apparel?
Why apparel? I was probably influenced by a couple of brands. Growing up, I was always into the skiing, surfing, skating scene. And I remember as a young kid just loving those heritage surf brands, Quick, Billabong, Rip Curl, and I was almost obsessed with them growing up. I then got to the Alps, and there were a few brands out there who sort of dialed into that community spirit and that niche of skiing. One brand in particular, I took a lot of inspiration from. I loved them. A brand called Planks. Not sure if you're aware of Planks.
Manchester based.
Yep. And I just thought what they were doing was really cool. Similar kind of story with the founder of Planks to me and what I've done. And this idea for apparel, it just kind of came from wanting to build more of a community-based brand around a passion, which was skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah. So let's go back right to the beginning then. So I think you started doing this back in 2016.
Yeah, so I had the idea for Bluebird the year before.
Okay.
In 2015, I had the logo, the concept, but I was working a full-time job in the Alps and I didn't really have the time to commit to it. I knew out of all the sort of schemes I had that Bluebird was maybe the one that had legs and could go somewhere, and that I wanted to really put a lot of effort behind. So I put it on pause for another year, figured a few more things out, and then in December 2016, that was when I launched it.
Okay, and so at the start, you were, if I remember well, you were actually importing blank tees from the UK to France, and you were screen printing them locally. So again, why that? Because again, within apparel, could have been anything. You know, why that? What's the story behind that?
Taught myself how to screen print back then. This was before print on demand websites and things were a thing. So back then, it was quite hard to get into the game unless you could brand it yourself. So I taught myself to screen print. I built screen printing frames from old picture frames and had a few logos. Taught myself how to do it, and it was buying blanks, just white t-shirts and grey hoodies from the UK. Got them shipped to France, and I would have printed to order. And it was the fact that I was doing it myself. I could offer customization, and I think this is possibly where the brand sort of differentiated itself from other brands, because I was able to offer customers, mainly seasonaires, that was the target market at the time, the ability to customize the back of the t-shirt or hoodie with the name of their ski resort. That was called a rear tag, and by tapping into that community and that passion for where that person spent their winter season, that set it apart, and that kind of got, I've used this little phrase before, which is super cheesy, that got the snowball rolling.
Perfect.
And then that's where it went from there.
And why Bluebird? And I mean, again, it's really interesting to me that you say, or that we've already identified, that there's no kind of entrepreneurial, let's say, experience spirit in the family, and yet you were thinking before about the business, and you decided to wait a bit. You were kind of fine tuning in your mind what it looked like. You had a brand name. It's super difficult to like imagine and understand kind of where this came from, this creative kind of spirit.
I guess when I went to school, I went to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I liked being kind of different. I was very adventurous back then, a lot more so than I have time for now, which frustrates me at times, but I would do a lot of traveling. I did many seasons. So I kind of wanted to break the norm in a way and get out of especially in Northern Ireland, when things are so kind of set up. You go to school, you go to uni, you get a job, you get married, you have kids. It's the same all over, but it's quite focused in Northern Ireland on that, and I didn't like that, and I still don't like that. So I wanted to break the mold in a way and do something on my own, something different, something for myself, and that's, I guess, partly where it came from. The name Bluebird, for skiers and snowboarders, they'll be familiar with that phrase, a bluebird day, perfect conditions, blue skies, fresh powder, like just the most incredible conditions you can ask for. So I ripped that off, and I switched the spelling of blue because I'm very passionate about France. So I switched it to the French spelling of Bleubird, and it still pisses me off every time somebody spells it wrong, which is a lot because your
I've been
phone
guilty.
your phone autocorrects it
Yeah.
back to English, which is I don't mind so much. But that's where the name came from, and it's now become people don't understand that because our general market aren't skiers or snowboarders. It's just it's a nice word, I guess.
Yeah. And okay, so you mentioned there that your market has, of course, shifted from those, first days of screen printing T-shirts in the French Alps, and now you're more, and you can see clearly from the logo, you have an association not just with the mountains, but with the ocean as well, and probably a little bit everything in between somehow. So how's that? What kind of drove that evolution?
Right. So the first year, 2016, 2017 winter was the first 6 months of Bluebird. I then realized that I had something here. That was my 7th season in the Alps, and if you get stuck out there, you're stuck for good. And I was aware that I didn't want to get stuck, so that's when I decided to move home. I took my camper van around France and Portugal for that summer and figured out where the brand was going to go. And I remember actually sitting in the back of my camper van at the Gorge de Verdun. Not sure if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Beautiful spot.
Great driving roads around.
Yeah, lovely. I was sitting in the back looking out sunset, and I was typing up an email to my dad, basically just pleading with him to let me move home back into the family house and run the business from there. And I sent it to my dad because he was the tougher one to crack. Mum would have been, yes, of course, son, just go for it. So I sent it to him, and like you mentioned earlier, it's just alien territory to them. So I think they were probably apprehensive and weren't sure what was going to happen, but they let me move in, and they supported me the whole way through. And it was moving back to Northern Ireland that I guess my passions shifted because they had to. I wasn't skiing and snowboarding every day because I couldn't. However, I'm big into my surfing, so I started surfing a lot more, and those passions that I have filtered into what Bluebird is. So that was part of why the brand shifted away from just snow, but also because I'd seen it happen with the brands I mentioned previously, with those super niche brands. You can't. It's hard to make a sale in the summer for a ski brand, and I was doing everything I could to make sales as much as possible every day. So I knew that I needed to shift the focus away from something niche into a more general outdoor adventure brand, and it was then this summer that I did that. At the start, it was very sort of seasonally focused, summer, winter, but we've moved away from that, and we're now trying to focus all year round.
Yeah, I think it was around 2020 that you brought on some friends as partners into the business. But thinking first about those 4 years, and before we get to that point, looking back at those 4 years, and so I guess 3 of them you were back here roughly.
Yep.
Yep. So what were the kind of challenges you faced at that time? So okay, so you're back from the Alps, you're back staying with your parents, you're running a business there. What were the challenges you faced at that time?
I mean, the brand was nothing back then. Very small scale. The challenges for me were having to do absolutely everything on my own. At that stage, I was still screen printing myself to order. I was in charge of the website, the marketing. I did rope in my younger brother to help with the fulfillment side of things. It was all very much just wearing every possible hat you had to wear, and that was tough. It was also tough because what we mentioned earlier of it being such a competitive market. The growth was slow, and having that kind of, call it naivety or just call it super focus, wanting to get the brand to a stage where it is now and beyond. It was that driving force which I guess got me through those kind of tougher times. You know, some days there was no sales coming through the website, and that really is a gut punch whenever you're breaking your back trying to do everything possible to build this brand. So I guess the challenges were all of the above.
Yeah.
Every day was tough, and just staying motivated in a very tough market.
And it was mainly that vision or desire or ambition, whatever the right word is, that to make it into something more that kept you going, or especially I think working on your own, as somebody that works on their own quite a lot,
Mm-hmm.
I know, it can be lonely,
Yeah.
it can be tough, especially as you said, when there are those days where you're like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
So anything else? Because those times I'm sure were tough. Anything else that kind of stands out that got you through those periods?
Well, probably I didn't know what on earth else I was going to do with my life. I'd spent, I got my university degree, but I did not want to go down the teaching route whatsoever. I'd seen my parents retire, and I'd seen them tire of education and how it was becoming quite difficult for them to continue on. I didn't want to go down that route at all. And I'd done my time in the Alps. I'd been bumming about for years, um, not knowing what else I was going to do. By being so passionate about the outdoors, about skiing, surfing, everything in between, and wanting to create a career for me based on my passions, that's probably the other thing that got me through.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I was going to ask, because you already mentioned that you went to uni, and
Mm-hmm.
I think actually kind of teaching and coaching was a core part of that course, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd come to the conclusion, though, that at least from a professional point of view, that wasn't going to be a focus. Of course, as you grow the businesses and as you're starting to lead people, actually that becomes a big part of what you do. But let's say it wasn't. What was it that kind of drove you to decide, okay, yeah, this definitely just isn't for me?
I was kind of, I wouldn't say forced into going to uni, but it would have been silly of me not to go. Um, the school, it was a great school I went to, but everybody went to uni after they completed their A levels, so it would have been maybe bad. It would have reflected badly on me and maybe also my family if I chose not to go to uni. I've always looked at going to uni as, I wouldn't say a regret, because I made some great mates, and I probably grew up a lot too, living away from home. But I don't know how much I got out of it. Interesting point there, and it's something I've never actually thought of. You're right though, Dan. It being in an environment where I'm being taught how to teach and taught how to coach, I've never thought about that, and maybe the skills that I did learn in terms of managing people and how that has come into play. So that's a really good point. Uh, why I just I wanted to get to the Alps so badly. From being a kid, it was always something I wanted to do, was get out there, get to the mountains and live there.
Yeah.
And I felt that uni was just getting in the way of that. I didn't go on to do the final year, which would have led me into the PGCE.
Okay.
I graduated and got out to the Alps as soon as I could. So I think that drive and passion to get out to the Alps is what ultimately led me away from the course I was doing.
Yeah. Okay. So then in 2020, you took, I would say, a massive decision on many levels, a massive decision actually to bring on board a couple of partners. So
Mm-hmm.
why? Why did you do that? Because you maybe somehow some of the answers are going to be some of the things you've already said.
Uh-huh.
But I think it's when you start something for yourself, bring on other people, especially when they're going to really be your partner in it, and not just kind of, let's say, members of the team. It's a big change.
It was probably the biggest decision I've ever had to make. Um, there's probably many reasons why, but I would say the one key reason is because I knew at that stage the brand was 4 years old, and it was tough. It was a struggle. It was e-com only, and that's a pretty tough game to be into, especially when you're not an expert and have no education in that side of things. Michael, my business partner, is an old friend. We grew up together, and he ran other businesses, not in this industry, but he ran them quite successfully. He knew what he was doing in terms of a B2B approach, very strategic. He had a lot of skills that I was lacking, and I think being able to identify your weaknesses is a strength, actually. And I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to take the brand any further than what it was, which was probably more of a hobby back then, because it wasn't paying me much at all, even though I was focused full time on it. I knew that if I had any hope of making a career out of this and making the brand I wanted it to become, then I needed help, and that help came in the form of an old mate and now business partner, Michael. So it was a tough decision, and it was a tough transition too. Probably a year or 2 years of getting used to working with a partner, because I'd been doing it all on my own for so long. So it was a whole new learning experience, but one that has certainly been paying off by the fact we're growing pretty well. We're still best mates. We haven't fallen out yet, and yeah, things are going well.
So there's so much to come back on. So you said, and I can completely understand, going through that transition, bringing on a partner was tough. So, and that, those first 2 years particularly were tough. So what were the kind of lessons you've learned over that time, and what do you think was the key to actually make it work?
Lessons I've learnt from that partnership. The one thing that I learned early on was probably understanding where the other person is coming from. So when Michael and I joined up, Michael had another friend who was his business partner at the time, Matthew, another Matthew. So 3 M's. It can be quite confusing at times. Matthew and Michael were partners, and the three of us then joined up. So it wasn't just me and Michael. And with that, Matthew brought a particular set of skills himself, which is more accounting, finance and operations, which he's brilliant at. So I mentioned earlier identifying your weaknesses, but also knowing your strengths. I think one thing I struggled with is maybe not being confident enough in what I was doing, because it seemed to be more of a hobby. It never really, we were turning over a good chunk of money, but it was never really seeing that success and growth that I wanted it to see. I was maybe putting that down to me not being good enough, that sort of inferiority thing, which still plays a big part in my day-to-day, as it does many people's. So actually being able to put your hands up and saying, guys, like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Can I have a bit of help? That was one thing that I learned early on. I needed to do more of, and just admit, I couldn't do this. And having that partnership, having, the guys by your side to fall back on, and they can then pick that up. That was brilliant, and it happens every day. So learning to maybe just admit that I can't actually do this. I need a bit of help. That was one thing that stood out to me, and still does.
Yeah. At the same time, though, so obviously Michael, you already said was a let's say a long term close friend, or at least friend. Um, did you know Matthew as well? Were you friends as well?
I knew him from the rugby pitch.
Okay.
We faced each other a couple of times
Ah,
as
great.
opponents.
Okay.
He still thinks he got the upper hand on me one time. I was a 9, a scrum half, and I
Okay.
think he was a centre. And I did throw a dodgy pass. I prided myself on my passing ability, but I threw a dodgy pass one match, and he intercepted it from their 22, their half of the pitch,
Yeah.
and he ran the full length and got a try. And he has never let this go. Every month, it comes up in conversation. So I didn't really know Matthew too well, but being one of Michael's best mates, we were going to get on,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the three of us do get on very well.
But I'm interesting. I think there's a lot of advice out there that would tell people don't work
Right,
with your friends and family.
right.
And I think I can resonate, let's say, with that. I mean, I've worked with my wife at Deckers at Hoka, and she now supports me today, and it's not easy for sure. So how have you been able to make that work and make that a success without damaging the friendship?
So that was one of the first things Michael said to me from the start. He was like, Matt, I want to do this. I want to make this work. But the number one priority is making sure that our friendship doesn't suffer. And I think that is very much still on our minds today, is first and foremost is making sure that our friendship stays tight. Because that's the last thing. You don't want to lose a lifelong friend over something that goes wrong in business. So I think the fact we're both aware of that is really important. I don't know whether I trust the guys with everything, and I know that the decisions they make are for the good of the company. We clash the odd time. We have disagreements, as you would quite often, but I think we're very good at knowing where each other has strengths and knowing where each other has weaknesses and picking up on that. And we're just, I think I'm pretty chilled out when it comes to what we need to do, and they can be. They probably aren't as relaxed as me at times, but they can be too, and we just seem to work. I think because we've each got our individual skill sets, we know when to back off or when to come in with a bit more force, and we respect that too, and that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think trust. I mean, you use two words there. I mean, trust and respect. I think are fundamentals of any relationship, but I think particularly in a business with friends, you must have that. Because as you said, you're going to have those discussions where you're going to disagree. And I think that's also important for the business, because I think if you all agreed all the time, you maybe wouldn't be kind of pushing things forward enough and challenging each other to think differently, do things differently. So that makes a lot of sense. And you've mentioned a couple of times about the fact that you'd identified in your mind that, okay, I maybe don't have the experience or the knowledge or the confidence in these areas. So maybe in the commercial and the strategy side, and in the operations and the finance side. So I think that's super smart to identify those gaps and bring people on to do that. So you have very complementary skills, because if I understand well, so now your, let's say, day-to-day focus is more from the creative point of view. So whether it's the product or the marketing of the brand, but I want to dig into, again, that kind of creative side, because again, when I look at your background and I look at your education, it's not clear where that kind of creativity comes from. Do you recognize that, where that comes from?
Um, I'm aware of that. Going back to that sort of lack of confidence, I'm aware that I don't have the I guess the education in creativity, the arts, for example. However, looking back when I was a bit younger, um, I always had a flair for creativity,
Okay.
and I think the youngest memory I have of being creative was around the time Banksy, you know, the
Yeah.
spray paint. Banksy was up and coming, and I was obsessed with Banksy to the point where I started creating my own replicas of Banksy around the local area. I taught myself how to cut out the templates because he would always use templates for the spray painting. I created those templates myself. So I think when I was, well, I can't remember, maybe 12, I created one template and I spray painted it in my bedroom at the time on behind the door. I then stupidly spray painted it on the wall of the corner shop late at night, which my dad cycled past every morning on the way to work. He saw it on the corner shop. He saw it in my bedroom, and yeah, I got in a lot of trouble for that one. Not the smartest move. So the passion for creativity has probably always been there. I went to school, high school. I studied art at GCSE.
Okay.
My art teacher then pleaded with me to do it at A level.
Okay.
So I did study art, however, not great at it. I never really excelled. It was more like different alternative art forms, the likes of the spray painting, that I was more interested in. So it's always been there somewhere. I just haven't really ever gone at it full time,
Yeah.
if you like. But I guess now that it is that creativity is showing in Bluebird, because I would still be in charge of a lot of the design side of things.
Yeah.
Um, you ask about where it maybe came from my parents' side of things. My mum in her retirement has actually developed a flair for art too,
Okay.
and the garden shed which Bluebird first ran from when I moved home has now turned into her little art studio.
Great.
So it's somewhere in the genes for sure.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. But it's funny, you say, oh, but I wasn't good at it at school. But for me, if your art teacher is telling you to do it in A level,
True.
there must be something there, because
Yeah.
otherwise she
Okay.
definitely wouldn't be doing that. If
Yeah.
she's thinking, okay,
Yeah.
this guy has
If it's
no
on her.
chance, I'm not going to push it. So
Yeah, that's true.
interesting, interesting, very humble approach there. Okay, so I know one of the cornerstones, particularly probably in the last 4 years or so, of Bluebird has been to, let's say, operate as sustainably as possible. Where does that come from?
So yeah, this is a big part of what we're trying to do. Before I get into it, I'll just mention that we actually took the choice to stop using the word sustainable
Yeah.
about 2 years ago. Because we don't actually believe we are sustainable, and we don't think that any business or brand that's manufacturing and shipping all over the world can actually be sustainable. I don't think people understand what the word means. So we stopped using that particular word, and we call ourselves eco-conscious. Where that came from the get-go, I don't really know. I've always been passionate about nature and the outdoors, and I knew that by starting something and by then manufacturing and creating product which creates waste, I knew that I probably had to do it as ethically as I could. So I guess it's just more my own values is where that came from at the start. And my partners and the whole team have the same mindset too. So it's just within us that we want to do essentially just the right thing.
Yeah.
And that comes in many different forms, but the fact we call ourselves eco-conscious, and yeah, quite simply, we just want to do the right thing for ourselves, for the business, and then that impacts the environment too.
Yeah. And I think, of course, the reality is that it would be easier somehow to start a business and grow a brand without having to consider those topics. Easier in terms of commercially, let's say, because I think we all know that right now to be eco-conscious and to try and run a business with that in mind, it does generally cost more money to do that than not. So what have been some of the challenges you've faced because of that?
I guess the big one is minimum order quantities. When we were just starting to develop new product a few years ago, to manufacture from recycled polyesters, for example, or organic cotton, the MOQs are much higher, and that comes, like you say, with a cost. So being able to weigh that up and figuring out how to make it work. We don't want to bring a product in that we don't believe in terms of the product, yes, but also in terms of its eco credentials. There was a time, I think it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, we launched a dry bag. It's a super popular product now. It's a backpack dry bag, and we started sampling it with a new supplier. We committed to, I can't remember how many units it was. It wasn't a lot. It was maybe 600, 800. We committed to that as a trial just to test the product in the market. It was our first backpack accessory. We got to the final stages, and then we learned that the supplier had kind of screwed us over, and that this product was not made with recycled polyester that we thought was in it. So by this stage, the product was sitting there. We had to ship it. We were out of pocket a bit, and we were also having to face selling a product that didn't have those eco credentials. What we did was, we're honest and transparent with our customers, and in the descriptions, product descriptions, and in sales meetings, we identified that this product isn't made from recycled materials. However, that didn't actually impact sales at all. The bag sold out super quick. So we were then faced with a new challenge. Do we repeat the order, or do we fix the problem? And by choosing the right thing to do and not repeating the order with that supplier, we turned down quite a lot of sales, quite a lot of cash, but it's the right thing to do, and that makes you can sleep better at night by knowing you've done the right thing. So we fixed the problem, and we made it from recycled materials, and we brought it in, and it's still one of our top sellers. But challenges like that are quite common in this game, and you've just got to, I guess, go with the flow and figure it out, which is what we're doing all the time, is figuring it out as you go.
Yeah. And I think, again, under the eco-conscious banner, there's obviously the product is one thing, but there's also kind of other topics that connect to that. So from a positioning point of view and from a brand point of view, maybe not necessarily linked to the topic, what are you doing to try and, again, align with that vision, that desire?
So everything we do, everything we create, we make sure that it's built with recycled or organic materials. We consolidate a lot of shipping. We do all the sort of product brand running exercises that have become standard now, which is great that is now the standard in the industry. Early on, I was planting trees for every order we got online, which is great, and it's a nice thing from a marketing sense, but it's good to be able to plant a tree for every order. We're still currently doing that. However, we're a little bit worried as to who we plant the trees with. It's a third party. We don't have control. We don't have transparency. We don't have proof that those trees aren't getting cut down after a couple of years of them growing. So we have set up our own foundation. It's called the Bluebird Foundation. It's not something we talk about an awful lot because it's quite hard to get the message across. And that's based out in Malawi in Africa. And what that is a project. There's a couple of projects under it, but the main one is by building cook stoves. It's a really simple concept. Essentially, in Malawi, 90% of families cook on an open fire, with wood as the fuel source, and that comes with problems to health. Smoke inhalation, young children getting burnt quite badly. It's also not very efficient. It uses 3 to 4 piles of wood a week. The women generally have to go and collect that wood from miles away. There's been incidents when people have got attacked, violent attacks whenever they're out in the woods collecting it. There's then the environmental impact too from just them having to cook to live, which is deforestation and carbon emissions. So what this project does, it's a really simple solution. We educate local people in how to build a cook stove, a really fuel efficient cook stove. It's called a changu changu moto, which translates to fast fire. And it's made out of natural materials, mud and clay bricks, which makes a stove much more efficient, fuel efficient, and much safer for the kids to be around. It reduces the wood consumption per family by 66%, which in turn reduces the carbon emissions by, I think per family, it's just over 3 metric tons of carbon per year, which is saved by using this really simple cook stove. So we're doing that as a project. It's run by us. We have full control, full transparency over what's going on. Every stove that's built is geotagged, so we can see exactly where that stove is built, if it's still there in a couple of years' time. And the really exciting thing is that it's having a really positive impact to the environment and to the families. But these people it's kind of growing organically. Word of mouth is spreading and people are starting to build their own and help other people in different communities build the stoves. So by educating people on how to do something really simple, is having really positive impacts on the environment and on the people on the ground. So that's one of the projects we run. It's quite a mouthful. There's quite a lot to it. It's quite hard to explain. But it's really beneficial. We have committed to trying to build 30,000 of those stoves in the next 2 years, and we're currently on about 8,500, which is really exciting. The other nice thing about that project is the fact that it's kind of safeguarded in a way. If Bluebird went under tomorrow, if everything went badly, that project, there's funds in a fund specifically for that project only. So if Bluebird went under tomorrow, that what we're doing out there would continue to last for a couple of years' time, which is it's nice to know that that there is a future with that too.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, good for you to first of all do something yourselves, because I think that transparency and authenticity is really important, but also to make such a clear financial commitment to it as well is great to see. So yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
That's really good. Back to the business a little bit. So and I know that as we've discussed, you're more focused on the creative side, but I'm interested, up until, let's say, I think probably the last 18 months, 2 years, you've been very focused from a business point of view on growing the brand within Ireland and the UK. But I think in the last couple of years, you've started to penetrate other markets, France, Germany, even the US, and I think for some of the Scandinavian markets as well. So what of the challenges that you've been facing to do that. And from a personal point of view as well, as you know, when you're thinking about the product and the brand, and you know how to kind of ensure that that resonates with maybe a consumer that's culturally obviously very different.
Yeah, so it was whenever I partnered up with Michael and Matthew, the focus on the model shifted away from what it was when I was running it on my own, which was ecom, to that B2B wholesale strategy. And for the first couple of years, it was largely focused on the UK and Ireland. And now we are in all those markets you mentioned, France, Germany, Finland, Denmark, the US. And it seems to be driving a lot of growth now. And there's a lot more potential we have identified in those markets. Michael would head up that side of things for export. We have now 10 partners across those territories who we manage, who Michael kind of manages, and it can be quite difficult. Not the language barrier, because they all speak quite good English, but translating the messages across. So in terms of the product that we are building for the next seasons and how the marketing looks, there's lots more to think about rather than just kind of doing what I was doing in the past for the UK and Ireland. We are that Irish outdoor brand, and we want to really convey that message in these export markets as best we can. And getting that across is quite difficult. When it comes to simple things like content creation, we want to show as much of Ireland and our product being used in Ireland and this harsh weather as much as we can. But that doesn't necessarily bode so well for the likes of if we're sat in a ski shop in the French Alps. The customers there kind of want to see something that is going to help them when they're out in the mountains, through things. So we're having to scramble a little bit to create content and to deliver the marketing messages in a way that is more universal.
Okay.
That is a constant learning, and I can't say that I'm on top of it whatsoever, but we're kind of, again, figuring it out as we go along.
And so do you think the Irish heritage of the brand, although of course actually ironically it was founded in the French Alps, but will that the Irish part of the story, you think, will that kind of remain as a red thread, and it's about how you tell it maybe differently, or will that, you think, over time go away?
No, we're very focused on keeping that Irish heritage. We are the fastest growing outdoor lifestyle brand in Ireland at the minute. 2 years ago we had 0 wholesale customers. Today we have over 300 accounts globally that we sell into. We're very focused on maintaining the fact that we are from here. There's brands all over the world that tap into their roots and where they're from, and you know, we live on an island in the middle of the Atlantic, which gets pretty awful weather at times. There's no reason why we can't create products that can really perform in different territories just as well. So no, we're fairly stuck on that Irish heritage.
Yeah, but that makes sense. So you're talking there about the expansion from a wholesale point of view, but I believe you're soon going to open a store in my old hometown of Annecy. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. A little bit going back to the roots of the brands in the French Alps.
Yeah, it's kind of almost full circle in a way. I used to drive the route from the Tarente Valley to Geneva every week through Annecy. So yeah, we have a store opening, a partner store opening there in March of 2025, which is really exciting. We've seen some really good growth in France, in the other export markets too, but especially in France. So seeing how that will go will be interesting, but it's also really reassuring that that these guys wanna jump on board the Bluebird wagon and go for it in Annecy, which is great. We've also opened stores. We've opened 3 stores in Northern Ireland in the past 9 months, and we also have another store opening in northern Germany too in 2025, which is exciting, and it comes with a lot of challenges too. But we'll keep going with it.
And so, what are some of those challenges?
There's again that sort of translating that message across, and displaying that message in store. We're a small team, and trying to manage all these, you're kind of pulled in many different directions a lot of the time, and that is something that is quite hard to manage. But I guess these challenges I'm talking about it's just added pressure with running the brand and getting on with making sure you prioritize correctly, but just getting on with what is needed at that time.
You touched on there, you used the word there, pressure. I'm sure as the business grows, probably maybe the pressure does as well. I don't know. I wonder if it's a bit like kids. They say that the bigger the kids get, the bigger the problems get. This is at least what I'm experiencing. How do you deal with that pressure? How do you manage that?
What is so great about having business partners is that all the pressure is now not on your shoulders, and you can kind of share that load. So there'll be pressures that I face, for example, if we open a new retailer and we need to get and their deliveries are hitting them at the end of the month, and we need to get the POS over. It can be quite time sensitive, especially for some of the multi-doors we sell into. There's time frames we need to hit, so that would be something that I've got to take on that the other guys don't necessarily need to worry about. However, in the same sense, Matthew's got pressures with operations, making those deadlines for shipping, making sure product arrives into our warehouse in time to then turn around and get out to customers. There's pressures all the time, but being able to share that load is a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your most important task as a founder of a business and one of the key leaders of that business?
Yeah, this is a question I kind of ask myself quite regularly. And it's probably also a running joke in the office. What does Matt actually do? At the start of things, like I mentioned before, I was doing everything. More recently, it's been much more focused on marketing and design. I think what is very important and often overlooked is my role is keeping the brand. It's very easy to veer off track. It's very easy to do something which maybe isn't aligned but maybe feels good at the time, whereas the long term, in the long term, it doesn't work for the brand. So trying to constantly keep the brand is quite a difficult task, and something that I have to do quite often.
Yeah.
And also being that, like, I get Bluebird is me in a way. It's my passions. It's my vision, and living that and making sure I stay true to that too. Is something that needs to be done, because that resonates with the whole team and beyond. Whenever I meet retail partners, our partner agents, I need to be portraying the brand, and that isn't easy to do at times.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of, I wouldn't say I'm the captain of the ship. I would say that Michael is very much the captain, and he keeps the ship on course. I'm maybe that guy up the pole looking out for icebergs. Don't mention the Titanic. It was built here, because that would mean I'm not doing my job very well.
We'll definitely put some Titanic beer in at this
point. But yeah, I suppose just trying to keep the brand.
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
it's quite an important overlooked task.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there about the team and the fact obviously the team is growing. So when you're looking to bring on board new, whether it's employees or partners or whatever it is, what are you looking for from those people? Is it particular skills or experiences, or what do you look for?
I mean, absolutely everybody has their own skills that are important. For us, the team dynamic, the morale, the energy in the office, and elsewhere, not just the office, um, is really important. And I think it's much more important that we bring in people who fit the team, fit the brand, and fit in with the other personalities too. I'm not as worried about this particular skill sets. I think that can be trained and learnt a lot of the time. But making sure we bring the right people in who have the right mindset is very important. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. Everybody from the full-time staff here to our partners in the export markets is very Bluebird in a way.
Okay.
Very not you don't have to be outdoorsy or adventurous. What we say, who we say we are in a lot of ways, are the friendly, nice guys and girls of outdoor lifestyle
Yeah.
brands, and we try and portray that as much as possible in everything we do, but also with the people we choose to work with.
So what would you say is the most but also least enjoyable parts of your role, what you do?
The most, but the least.
No, the most and the least. Sorry, I didn't articulate that well. So what's
Okay.
the most enjoyable and what's the least enjoyable in what you're doing now?
Okay, so the most enjoyable, seeing the brand grow is really nice. And a lot of the time I'm kind of stuck in my computer doing the day-to-day things that I do all the time. But whenever you take a step back, and whenever you see these accounts signing up to our wholesale platform that our partners have onboarded, I think we're kind of bringing on board about 100 new wholesale accounts a year, at the moment. And seeing the fact that some little outdoor shop in the middle of Midwest America wants to stock our product, it's kind of like wow, like that is really cool. Like that's really impressive. We've built something that is in demand in all these weird and wonderful places. So that's really enjoyable. The least enjoyable, what do I not enjoy about the job? I suppose it's a good thing that there's very little springs to mind, and I do enjoy it a lot. There's always challenges and there's always issues you face as a as a leader, but I don't have an answer, Dan. I'm sorry, but I
Okay.
don't have an answer for the least enjoyable.
Okay.
That is a positive, but it's also quite boring for your listeners.
No, no problem. No problem. So who would you say are the people that have influenced you professionally, or have there been people that have influenced you professionally? I mean, you talked earlier on about maybe some brands and I guess
Mm-hmm.
maybe the founders of those brands,
Mm-hmm.
but anything that kind of stands
There's
out?
nothing that stands out. I think inspiration and influence kind of crosses over. So yes, there's been those heritage brands that I looked up to as a kid. There's been the more recent brands that have done something similar before me. Um, there's been, I mean, whenever I first started Bluebird, I read Phil Knight's book Shoe Dog, which I'm not huge into reading books, but it was just very inspirational, motivational, and it kind of just told a story of just getting on with the hard tasks, getting back up again after you've had some failures, and just keeping going.
Yeah.
So that's probably quite inspirational.
Yeah.
But in terms of people, I don't really have a standout.
Okay. Okay.
influence.
And we've talked about the fact that through your education, and through your parents, the process of teaching and coaching was a kind of a core, a red thread through those topics. And you had the reflection that, okay, and how does that kind of impact you today? But what about you? I mean, have you had, and maybe it's a little bit the same question, but have you had or worked with any kind of coaches or mentors that have kind of supported you and guided you over the last eight years?
Mentors, no. Funnily, actually, before Michael and I joined up, I was living back in Northern Ireland. He would have caught up with me every now and then for a coffee, and I think he identified that I needed some sort of guidance, and he was that unofficial kind of just a shoulder to cry on. Not that I was doing much crying, but just somebody to chat with about things that were going on.
Yeah.
So possibly in a way. Then more recently, my dad actually went to a university reunion. He was Loughborough, and he went to a reunion a couple of years ago and bumped into an old friend, a guy called Roger Wyatt, who had been the CEO of Hurley for many years. And Dad kind of told me this when he came back, off the cuff. He was like, "Oh, I bumped into this guy," and I was kind of like, "Dad, why haven't you told me this before? Can you please share his details and I can reach out?" So I reached out to Roger, and we've had a few calls, and he sometimes gives me advice, and just it's more just somebody to chat to. He's been quite useful in that sense, just to make sure I'm all right and I'm getting on with things the way they need to be going.
Oh, that's great. That's great to have somebody with that experience
Yeah.
to like you said, sometimes just to share is a big help.
Yeah, definitely.
So what would you say is the most valuable piece of advice you've ever been given? And it doesn't necessarily have to be professional.
So funnily, actually, it probably comes from a call I had with Roger a couple of years ago. I think it's very easy to get distracted, and to jump on trends, whether they're for marketing or whether they're for product. And Roger mentioned to me, he was like, "Matt, you've got a really good product, you've got a really strong brand. Just make sure you identify what you're doing well and stick to that." And he was coming from a product side of things, because we were still young and growing, and we were dipping our toe into various categories of product. He kind of helped me just think, actually, we need to just focus on what we're really good at doing, and that is something we're quite focused on now. Is doubling down on product we know is working and categories we know is working, and focusing on that. So I think being able to identify what you're good at and sticking at that is a good piece of advice.
Okay, so my next question would always be, okay, what advice would you share? So I'm guessing
Okay.
that's probably one maybe piece of advice that you would share.
Yes. Another piece of advice I'd share is maybe it's good to lift your head up and out of the sand pit. Sometimes you're swamped, you're stuck in your own wee bubble, doing your day to day every week, and it's quite hard to see things from a different perspective, and that might mean you have to take a couple of days off, or you're going on a holiday, or you're going on a trip. And it's in those moments when you're stepping away from your emails, from what you're doing all the time, that you can look at things from a different perspective, and just, I guess, get a check on where the business is going, what the business is doing, and where it's going. Because otherwise you're going to miss things, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to miss opportunities that come along. So being able to step back is probably a good piece of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Maybe one more?
One more piece of advice. Yeah. Celebrating the little wins. Again, it's very easy. week in, week out, you're just there's a lot of challenges you face. You're firefighting, you're dealing with problems, and the staff can maybe start to lose morale if that's constantly happening. So I think what the three of us, Michael and Matthew and myself, are good at doing, me maybe not so much, I need to work on that, is celebrating the little wins at the end of the week, or just every day, just identifying that's a great job, well done there, and giving praise and giving thanks is pretty important. It goes a long way.
Absolutely. And it's free.
It's free.
Which is always good. So, if today was your last day at Bluebird, if you were going to head back to the French Alps,
right, the dream,
and give it all up and retire somewhere on the side of a mountain, what would be your parting message to the team here?
To the current team, I guess it would have to be a thanks. It would have to be an appreciation. Thanks to you guys for helping me build the brand into what it is now. Because without the team, and it's everybody, it's not just my business partners, it's the whole team. They are vital to the brand. So it would be thanks. It would be keep at it, keep going, and remember just to get outside and explore. That's why I'm doing it, I suppose, and that's what the brand's all about.
Great. Well, I can't think of a better way to finish. So thank you very much, Matt, for taking the time today.
Thank you.
And for inviting me up to Belfast and to your showroom here, which is a really nice little spot. And congrats on everything you've already achieved. But it's clear that you're probably not going to be heading out to the Alps anytime soon. I feel like this is just the start of the Bluebird journey. So good luck for the coming months, years, and I look forward to seeing how the brand develops.
Thank you very much, Dan.
No worries. Take care. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Matt. If you did, I would really appreciate if you could please leave a review or comment. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe or follow, as it helps with the algorithm. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to seeing you soon for the next Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode.